That's right. How's the gate?
It was open. I was going to leave it.
Okay, 98b at the new chapter at the Mishnah. So here we go. A tvul yom, somebody who is impure, he went to the mikvah and he's just awaiting nightfall to become pure. That's called a tvul yom. Tvul is the table. He went to the mikvah that day and he's awaiting nightfall. Then there's somebody else who's called a mechusar kippurim, someone who his purification depends on more than just the mikvah and nightfall. He actually has to bring sacrifices. So he's mechusar, he's lacking kippurim, kapara, because he has to bring sacrifices. That's two categories of people. These people are einan cholkin b'kach. We know that kohanim get portions of the food. There's food that's brought, and their kohanim are divided up into different groups. And each day, those groups are divided up into different groups. And different families on a daily basis are getting apportioned part of the sacrificial meat. So these people, though, einan cholkin b'kachim, lechol erev, they don't get a portion. They can't eat at nighttime. So if you're lacking sunset or you're lacking sacrifices, you're still impure on some level. You don't get a portion of the sacrifices, and therefore you're not able to eat even after you went to the mikvah. So all you're waiting for is even after you nightfall. Even so, at 2 p.m. you're waiting for nightfall. 6 p.m. nightfall arrived. You still can't eat them because at the time that they were apportioned out, you didn't have a portion because you were impure. Fine, that's that. In onain, so an onain is someone who lost a relative, and the relative has not been buried yet. He's called an onain, and that is biblical. We'll see how far biblical it is. It's just the day or the nighttime, but it's biblical. So he is no geya ve'eno makri. He's going to be a little bit different. He can touch the sacrifice. The Gemara doesn't ask what exactly that's referring to, but he can touch as opposed to the impure person who cannot touch. However, ve'eno makri, he's not able to do the service. Only a Kohen Gadol who loses a relative, it's forbidden for him to stop doing the service. He has to continue. It's a very high level, but a regular Kohen is actually prohibited from serving in the temple. But he's not going to have the same status as somebody who is impure. Okay. The Eino Cholek Lechol Erev. Same thing. He doesn't have a portion in the sacrifices, and therefore he cannot participate at nighttime, even after his aninus is over, even after they did the burial. But at the time that they apportioned out the sacrifices, he was not able to partake. Therefore, even afterwards, when he is able to partake, he does not get to eat. Now, Bale Mumin, interestingly enough, blemish Kohanim, there's 24 blemishes that would render a Kohen blemished. Bain Bale Mumin over him, whether it's a blemish that passes, right? Some bruises come and go, and some bruises are permanent. So a guy missing an arm is permanent, but a guy has other things is going to be temporary. So whether you're a Bale Mumin over or even Bale Mumin kavuin, the novelty here is they differ. They are cholkin v'ochlin. They do get a portion of the kohanic food. Whatever offerings are brought that the kohanim get to eat of. Just because you're blemished does not invalidate you from partaking in the food. Aval lo makrivin, but a Baal Mum is still forbidden to do the service. So we have a difference now so we have people that are impure, waiting for their purification. We have someone whose relatives have died in onain, and now you have a Baal Mum, someone who's blemished. So the first three do not partake in the food, and the fourth one, the Baal Mum, does. But of course he can't serve because he's blemished. So now, says the Mishnah, Kol she'ena roy lavoda ena cholek b'basar. Now, anyone who's not fitting to do the service doesn't get a portion of the meat. Now, that's not really true. We just said that a blemished person is not fit to serve, and he does get a portion, but except for him. The Gemara is going to ask this question. What do you mean? a line ago, you contradicted yourself. So let's see. So v'kol she'ein lo b'basar, ein lo ba'oros. Now, along with the meat, there's also hides that the Kohanim get. So anybody who doesn't get the meat doesn't get the hides either. What is that? I guess so. I mean, he can have tomorrow's. Just dinner tonight. It's not like,
He's not starving you.
No, he can go home and have his own food. Yeah, that's just a special sacrificial food. His wife can prepare whatever she wants. Yeah, no. We're not saying he has to fast. We're just saying that the special portioned meat, which gets divvied out through different sacrifices, that the Kohanim have a merit of eating, so that he doesn't partake in. That's all we're saying. Okay, so yeah, afilu tameh, even somebody who's impure, b'shas zurikas damin, when the blood is being thrown, v'tahor b'shas hektar chalavim, and he's pure by the time they're offering up the different fats of the animals. Still, eino cholik b'basar. You have to be someone who's fit at the time the blood is being thrown. How do I know? Shenamar hamakives hadam as dam hashlamim. The one who brings the blood of the shlamim. It's all based on the bringing in the blood. That's achel Aaron. Lo tiyah sho kayam in the mana. It's the person who's fit to apply the blood, to sprinkle the blood. Such a person gets a portion of the Kohanic food. But if you're not fit at the time of the application of the blood, so then you are not fit to eat either. Okay, next page. You scared them all away, Jules. Me, you, and Zoom. Yeah. Oh, I'm scared them. They kind of know Daf Yomi shit. I don't know. Yeah. So, or they forgot that it's 6 today. I think they're protesting. They're outside with pickets. We want 6:10. Minat honey mili. What is the source that these different individuals who are lacking purification, whether you're lacking sunset or you're lacking a korban, a sacrifice? What's the source that they do not partake in the different foods of the Kohanim? It is interesting because there's a Gemara that's repeated numerous times that when the Kohanim eat, so then the owners get purified, get atoned for. I mean, there's something to the eating which is more than just consuming calories when it comes to the food. It's interesting. So, yeah. So, Amr Reish Lakish, Damar Kura says Reish Lakish. The pasuk says, it says HaKohen HaMachatos Yochlena B'Makom Kodesh. So it's the Kohen who's going to be able to sprinkle up the blood. He gets to eat. So very simple. You who are fitting to sprinkle the blood, you get to eat. You who can't do that, can't eat. The klalahu. And one second. The klalahu, and that's the rule, I guess. And that's the rule. The hare mishmar akula the ein mechatin the ochlin. So what if so the Kohanim were divided up into 24 different groups called the mishmaros. So now let's say you have one of these groups that that only one of the guys in the group, he's the one that threw the blood on. Now everyone else didn't throw the blood on, but yet they all can eat the food. So you have one guy doing it for everybody. So according to this, it sounds like only the person who throws the blood, he gets to eat. But it's not true because you have groups where one guy will do it for everybody and everyone gets to eat. So you see that the eating is not dependent on the actual sprinkling of the blood. And I think that previous time was a question. The klalahu, is that really the rule that you have to actually throw the blood to be able to eat? What do you mean? You have a whole group. Yeah, there's 30 of us. One guy's chosen, and you take this korban, you go through the blood, we'll all get to eat. And that works. You're right. What Reish Lakish meant to say was, you have to be fitting to sprinkle the blood. You don't have to be somebody who's actually going to do it. You have to be somebody who is fitting to do it. So, a katan under bar mitzvah, he's not fitting to throw the blood on, and yet he gets to partake in the meat. So a katan himself, the Gemara learns out, says ish, got to be a man, not a child. And at the same time, though, it says he's allowed to eat. So that flies in the face of this rule. You have someone who is not fitting to do the avoda, to do the service in the temple. At the same time, though, when the family sits down to eat their delicious chatas meat, so the son gets portioned also. So Ella, what does it mean, yoichlena? What it means is not eating, but yichalkena. It means get apportioned out. Ra'ui lechitui cholek, she'eno ra'ui lechitui, eno cholek. What it means is someone who's fitting to do the service gets a portion of the food, and someone who is not fitting to sprinkle the blood will not get a portion of the chatos. Yeah, so a katan is interesting. A katan, he can eat, but it's not really his portion. I mean, I guess his father can give him some food, but he doesn't have his own portion. So here we're saying someone who's fitting to do the sprinkling of the blood is fitting to actually own his own portion of the meat. He gets a portion, some of the meat, and therefore a katan is excluded. Fine. I hare balmum, a blemished kohen, the einaro lechitu, he cannot sprinkle the blood up, and yet the chole, he does get a portion. That also flies in the face of this rule. Says the Gemara, yeah, but a balmum is different because he's a special inclusion. He's an exception to the rule. Every rule has to have some exceptions, right? That's what I always thought that they're meant to be broken, right? So a balmum, Charles, we're about 8-9 lines down from 99a. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down. So balmum, first word, Rachmana Rabbe. So balmum, the blemished guy, the blemished Kohen, Rachmana Rabbe, the Torah, it includes him. How do I know? Where does it say that? Kol Zachar B'Kohanim. Kol, that word kol, all male, what's all male Kohanim? Just say male Kohanim. No, all comes to include the Rabbo's balmum, to include someone who is blemished. Someone who's blemished gets to partake in the eating. Okay, so now we have one of these situations where the Torah doesn't say a blemished person gets to eat. It says the word kol. Any person gets to eat. Now, we're limiting that to a blemished kohen. And we're excluding the people in our Mishnah. The Tful Yom, the guy that went to the mikvah that's waiting for sunset. The guy that's impure waiting to bring a sacrifice. The guy that's an onain whose relative died. And we're including a balmum. So here we're going to ask, who told you that's what you include? Maybe include a guy waiting to be pure. So a Tful Yom or a Mechusar Kippurim waiting for those guys who are impure waiting to be pure. So the aim of Kol Zachar L'Rabbo is Tful Yom. Maybe that word Kol comes to include a Tful Yom, someone who is awaiting sunset to become pure. Says the Gemara, no. Mistaber Balmum, Habale L'Rebuy Shken Ochel. When we're talking about including a balmum, so now once again, we're including him in getting a portion of the food. So we're asking, how do I know that? And the fact that it includes him in terms of eating of the food. But we're asking that who says that eating of the food should include him? Maybe it should include a Tful Yom. So we say, no, balmum, a balmum is able to eat. So maybe the guy that's able to eat, we should make sense that he's included when it talks about
because he's eligible even because he is eligible to even from the temperature for a night.
Okay, fine, right. Okay, Rashi answered my question. This pasuk says eating, but what it's referring to is really apportioning it out, because eating is going to be another explicit verse. There's going to be a verse in a different part of Vayikra that says that the blemished person can eat. So this verse, it uses the word eating, but it really means apportioning. So this is why the word yochlana, the Gemara interpreted as yichalkena, to apportion out. because there's another explicit verse that's referring to eating. So this verse is referring to apportioning out. So now we're asking, how come you included a blemished person? Because we answered, he's included in eating. That's going to be from somewhere else. It says, there's another verse that says that a blemished person could eat. So it makes logical sense that the guy that could eat is the guy that gets the portion of the food. So that's why he's included. So it says the Gemara, Adrabah, let the guy who's waiting nightfall to have a portion of the food. Why? He's just waiting a few hours, then he's totally fit to do everything. A blemished person is not fit at all. So maybe the guy that's just waiting a few hours, and when those hours come and it's nighttime, he's totally pure. Maybe he should really be the one that's right. You have a car, right? There's things that are like essential to the car, like the engine not working. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you think, sometimes you have the defroster is not working so well. It's not essential to the car, right? So here you have a balmum, a blemished Kohen. That's very much, he's not fit at all. Daytime, nighttime. So include the Tvul Yom, which is such a minor thing, and just waiting a few hours. Says the Gemara, no, but hashta miya halochazi. Okay, but we don't really care about what's going to happen in a few hours. Right now, when we're apportioning out the meat, the Tvul Yom, the guy that's waiting nighttime, is not fit. So the fact that he will be fit is irrelevant for us. So therefore, the first answer is that the Kohen is included in the apportioning because he's included in the eating. And therefore, special inclusion for the Kohen. But the general rule is going to be, if you're not fit for the service, you're not fit for the apportioning either. Rav Yosef Rav Yosef says, what does it mean? Let's see, this word yochlana that you translated instead of eating as, yichalkena, you're going to portion out. So liftov rachmana yichalkena. My yochlana. Why didn't the Torah just say yichalkena? Let the Torah say divvy out. Why did it say eating, and then you're interpreting it as divvying it out? Shmamina, to teach you, to teach you, the reason why I mentioned it like that, but their interpretation is apportioning, is to teach you this exactly this point. Someone who's fit for eating is fit for apportioning. Someone who's not fit for eating is not fit for apportioning. So that's why the Baal Mum, who's fit for eating, he gets apportioned out the sacrificial meat. But someone who's a Tvul Yom, who's not fit for the eating, is not fit for the apportioning either. Okay. You have a blemished person who's also impure. So now we just showed you that a blemished person a blemished Kohen does get a part of the meat. You're divvying it out, you give him to. What if he's impure? Well, since he's not fit, on the one hand, you could say, listen, he's not fit because he's impure, but a Baal Mum is included, so he's included too. Dilma, you'll say, no, how far do you take that rule? Only someone who's practically fit for eating gets a part of the meat? Or do you say only the category of a person who in general is fit for eating gets a portion? So if you're looking practically he can't eat, he's impure. But if you're looking categorically, a blemished person categorically is included. He happens to now be impure, but in general, such a person is included, and therefore maybe he should get a portion of the meat as well. So Amarabba Toshma, Kohen Gadol Makrib Onein, the Eino Ochel, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, what happens? He can bring sacrifices even when he's an Onein, even when he lost a relative, the Eino Ochel, but he cannot eat. The Eino Cholek, and he doesn't get a portion of the meat. Lechol Erev, he does not, he does the service, but he can't eat or get a portion of the meat. Shmamina, roi la'achila be'ina shmamina. We learn from here that you need someone who's actually going to be able to eat it. So a Kohen who is a blemished Kohen and is impure, right now he cannot eat the meat because he's impure. Right now he will not get a portion of the meat either. It goes practically. Kohen Gadol could do the service, but he cannot eat the meat because he's an onain. He lost a relative. So too, he won't get a portion of the meat. So those two are going to go together. Practical eating will determine if we give you a portion of the meat or not. Yeah? Good? Okay. Now you have a Kohen who's tameh. But it's the communal sacrifices, which at least by Pesach we have dispensations by if you're impure. So Mao she do you apportion to the impure Kohen a piece of the meat? Do you say that the Torah cares about the one who could sprinkle, and even though he's impure, but by a communal sacrifice, we waive that in certain situations, and therefore he still is fitting and should get a portion of the meat? O Dilma Roy Lachila, no, at the end of the day, practically, can you eat? Yes or no? Just because you're impure and a dispensation that you could perform the service, it's a communal sacrifice, but that does not mean you can eat the meat because you're still impure. So how do you look at it? On the one hand, he could do the service. On the other hand, he can't eat. Same proof. The Kohen Gadol, who's an onen, lost an immediate relative, is able to do the service, but he cannot eat, and therefore he will not get a portion of the meat. So we learn from there that what we care about is practical eating. Can you practically eat? If yes, we'll give you a portion. So too, the impure Kohen, very nice, you can do the service, even though you're impure. At the end of the day, you're not allowed to eat from that sacrifice. So since you can't eat from it, you don't get a portion either. Yeah. Reminds me of my mother said, if you don't vote, you can't complain. Yeah. So if you can eat, then you can partake. So onen. Okay, now to the onen. Onen is someone who loses one of his 7 immediate relatives, and the person has not been buried yet. And so that's the person who's exempt from doing positive commandments. He's supposed to be occupied with taking care of the deceased. Now we're going to see it's for sure biblical. The question is the day and the night, or just the day, but the first day. So that the Mishnah says he touches, but he can't sacrifice. So what does that mean? One nogea, really? He's allowed to touch, meaning as opposed to the people who are impure in the Mishnah who cannot touch, they can't cause the sacrifice to be impure, but an onen could. Now we're going to have a question from the end of Chagiga, which deals with a lot of these impurities. We're going to have a number of answers to this difficulty. Our Mishnah says onen nogea ve'eno makriv. Onen can touch sacrifices, but he cannot sacrifice them. The Mishnah in Chagiga says v'raminhi onen umachusar kippurim. Someone who's an onen, so lost one of his 7 immediate relatives. Lost one of his immediate relatives, which is 7. So umachusar kippurim, someone who is lacking bringing a sacrifice. He's done his mikvah. He waited the right time. It's sunset. He just has to bring a sacrifice. Both of those people, if they want to partake, need to tzrichin tvila lekodesh. They have to go to the mikvah they have to go purify themselves in order to partake in the sacrifices. So that Mishnah sounds like the onen has to go to the mikvah. Our Mishnah doesn't make that dispensation. It doesn't make that rule. It just says an onen is someone who could touch the sacrifices, but he cannot bring them. Here it sounds like the onen has to go to the mikvah, likodesh. I don't have a chance to likodesh. To eat the sacrifice or to even touch them.
They touch record. Does not require immersion.
Right. And that Mishnah says that he does require immersion, Kodesh, even to touch the sacrifices. So which one is it? Does someone who loses his 7 relatives have to go to the mikveh, yes or no? Our Mishnah, no. That Mishnah, yes. It's not a difficulty. Our Mishnah is talking about where he went to the mikveh already. That's why. There he didn't. What does mikvah have to do with losing one of your immediate relatives? Aninos is a status where you're supposed to be involved in the burial process, and right now you have a status of an onen, someone whose relative died who hasn't been buried yet. How is going to the mikvah going to solve anything? You didn't touch anything. You're not impure. So it says Aninos still returns to him, meaning it never left him. But I think it's saying what do you gain in the mikvah? what did you gain? Your aninus has not been removed from you. It comes right back. I don't think it ever left you in the first place. The wording is it comes right back. I don't think it means it leaves you there. That doesn't make sense. It just pointing it out that exactly. So the Amar Abar Huna Onein Shetofal Aninus Choseres. The language to me is bothersome. It says the Aninus returns to him. It's like so an Onein that goes, the Aninus returns to him, which I think just means it never leaves him. So that's not a good answer to our question. Ella lo kasha had the asach daite had the lo asach daite. So interesting thing that in Onein, so now he's busy taking care of the deceased. It could be he took his mind off of being careful from touching anything which is impure. If he touches something which might be impure, if his mind's not focused on keeping his purity because he's busy with the burial plans, so that someone has to go to the mikvah, and that's the Mishnah Chagiga. Our Mishnah, where it doesn't mention any of that immersion, is talking about a Kohen who is careful not to touch anything which is impure. Hadlo asik daite. So says the Gemara, but hold on. If we're actually worried that he might have touched something that's impure, let's say a corpse, we're worried that he wasn't careful and touched a corpse, so mikvah is not going to help you. Then you have to go hesakadas shlishi v'shvi by. You need to go through the whole purification process. Day 3 and day 7, you sprinkle the ashes, the paradum ashes. Damer Rabbi Yostai, Rabbi Matunam, Rabbi Yochanan. Hesakadas sarich hazash shlishi v'shvi. If you actually took your mind off of it and you need to stay focused, then you got to go through the paraduma process of day 3 and day 7 to sprinkle on you. Okay, so says the Gemara, well, that's not a problem. Why? Maybe you can split. Lokash, how the asak daite mitame meis, and how the asak daite mitame sheret. So maybe you could say that that which he requires day 3 and day 7 paraduma is where he totally took his mind off everything, and we're worried he touched the corpse. Our mission in Chagiga though is just he for sure didn't take his mind off that to not touch a corpse. That he knows. But he wasn't careful and might be touching a sheret, one of the creepy crawlies that causes impurity. That much maybe we assume that his mind wasn't as focused. So, yeah. So says the Gemara, Tame sheretz, Tame ma'al. So Herav Shemesh boy. One second. If you actually got impure by touching one of the creepy crawlies, so then mikvah's not going to help you. You have to actually wait till nightfall also. That's one. But ode afilu trumanami. If we're worried about that, then we should even not allow you to even if for truma you have to go to the mikvah. But the Mishnah Chagiga says mikvah is likodesh. It's only for the sacrificial offerings. But if we're actually worried you touched a creepy crawly, so that is going to require mikvah even for a lesser sanctity item such as the truma. And yet the Mishnah only says mikvah for kodesh, for sacrificial offerings, and not truma. So now said the Gemara finally, it's trying very hard to answer this. The Amar of Yirmiyah, the guy says, Nishmarti midavar hamatameni, below Nishmarti midavar haposlani. I guarded myself from something which will cause me impurity, meaning on a biblical level, but I did not guard myself from that which causes me impurity on a rabbinic level. So a biblical tuma would require even sunset. Those things that would require sunset, like a creepy crawly, that he was careful. He wasn't careful in terms of things that are rabbinic, like eating the sacrificial, like eating sacrifices. Those things are going to be are rabbinic. They don't need the nightfall. The prohibition of eating something when you're in a state of impurity from certain things that cause impurity, there's only the things that would be rabbinic that don't require sunset. So, yeah. So now says Mara, Umi ika nitarusa lepalgo. You ever have such like a half watching yourself for truma? You ever have such a thing where I watched myself for biblical impurity, but not for rabbinic impurity? Like that's a very funny thing. Says Mara, yeah, we do have such a thing, and I'll show it to you. The Hatanya, a guy's carrying a basket on his head. You know, if you look at that in Yerushalayim, bread on their head. So the guy carries Odel Hasala Rosho. The guy's carrying a basket. It says a fig. Okay, how does it know? I don't know. Fine. It says. I guess that's the context over there. Yeah. Fine. So he's carrying a basket. Okay, a fig's on his head. Fine. So and inside the basket is a shovel. You have a shovel inside the Amar, and the guy says like this: Libi al hasal. My focus is on the basket. The ain libi al magrefa, but I'm not focused on the shovel. So therefore, hasal tar magrefa tmeya. The guy says, I guarded the basket from impurity, so therefore the basket is going to be pure. The shovel, I didn't guard the shovel for impurity, so maybe the shovel is going to be impure. But what do you see? You can have this kind of split. You can guard from some things and not from others. So I don't understand. If the shovel got impure, then the basket's impure too. The shovel's in the basket. So the titma magrefa l'sal. So says the Gemara, no, ain kli metame kli. No, one vessel will not cause impurity to another vessel. Okay, fine, but titma mashivasocho though. Maybe there's food in the basket, like figs. Let the shovel impurify the figs. So Amarava, no. The Omer Shemartia midavar hametame, the lo Shemartia midavar haposla. So this idea that the figs are going to be impure is only going to be, it's only a rabbinic thing that if the shovel got impure from somewhere else, that it can give over pure impurity to the figs. That's only going to be rabbinic, I think, only for things like truma. It'll now be prohibited for kohanim, but that's only rabbinic. It's not biblical. So therefore, he says, I guarded it from things that are would cause it, so to speak, real impurity, biblical impurity. I didn't guard it from things that it might cause a rabbinic impurity too. What is that? Pasul. Yeah. That word is rabbinic. Mm-hmm. So this exciting story. So it hit the great rabbis. So it went, and literally means it rolled into it. It went into the office, so to speak, of Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo. And can you do split this kind of impurity? Watch for this, not for that. Amar le lo shmielu hadam Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rab. Did you not hear what Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rab? Ha'ochal shlishi shel truma. So now, usually in biblical impurity, so we know there's something called the primary category of tumah, so like a corpse. And we know someone touches a corpse becomes a primary category of tumah. And we know that the person touched something now becomes a secondary category of tumah. After a secondary category of tumah, I don't believe biblically you can really transfer it at all to the next, to the third category. However, when it comes to sacrificial things, truma and alike, there we said for truma it's going to be invalid. So that which Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rav, ha'ochal shlishi shel truma. So this is somebody who is someone who ate truma, who has a third degree of impurity. So ha'ochal shlishi shel truma, aser lachol. Such a person is impure now, and this is now a fourth degree. He ate a third degree. This only applies in the world of sacrifices. He ate a third degree. He now cannot eat the sacrificial offerings, but he could touch them. But he could touch them. So Alma. Sorry, just one clarification. This matter that rolled into the office of Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo is this is this question, not this specific case of Tumah, but our original question of an onain can touch, but he can't eat, and the question we brought from Chagiga, that was brought to Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo. The daddy says, look, what Rabbi Yochanan said, one who eats truma, that was impure. So he now, also lechel, he cannot eat sacrificial offerings, but he could touch them. So what do you see from there? You see a proof to our Mishnah. Alma, the achila of Rabbanan Maila, the negia of Rabbanan Maila. When it came to eating, they were more strict. That's why the onain in our Mishnah, who lost one of his relatives, he cannot eat things. However, he's able to touch them. So once we saw here that by eating they made a special stringency, so now we understand our Mishnah that allows the onain to touch, but not to eat. It's because by eating they made a special stringency. Yeah. And that which the Mishnah Chagiga said that the onain has to go to the mikvah, so that Rashi says it's not for it's only for eating he has to go to the mikvah, not for touching. The original question was our Mishnah says an onain can touch sacrifices, and the Mishnah Chagiga said he has to go to the mikvah first, right? And then we got to the whole thing about he had his mind on it, mind off it. So at the end of the day, this answer is for eating, he has to go to the mikvah. Everyone agrees for that. Because eating, they made a special stringency. For touching, they never made that stringency, and therefore he does not go to the mikvah. So the both Mishnahs do not contradict each other. It just depends. Is it for eating or for touching? For eating, extra purification required. For touching, not. Mm-hmm. Okay. The Eino Cholik Lechol. So this is the onain still. He doesn't do the service, and he does not get a portion of the meat. So Niflag Hudelo Polig. So it sounds like from the Mishnah that he himself doesn't get a portion, but maybe if his friends invite him, they can give him to eat. But if his friends invite him, he can eat. Is that really true? Veramini, it says in Zebachim that an onain is tovel v'ochel as pischol erev avalo b'kachim when it comes to the korban pesach and only the korban pesach. He can eat it in the evening time, but not the rest of the sacrifices. So, sounds like from Pesachim, there's a special dispensation by the Korban Pesach. It's very, very strict that we allow the onain to go to the mikvah and eat the Korban Pesach that night, Pesach night at the Seder. But aval lo b'kachim, it's only Korban Pesach. It doesn't apply to other sacrifices. And yet our Mishnah's implication is he doesn't get an original portion. But if he gets invited over to the Hanukkah party, that he can eat, right? So Amar Rebbe Yirmiyah, mi difti lo kasha. No, that's not a difficulty. Kan be Pesach, kan be Shari Mos Hashanah. But Pesach, I did achol Pesach, achol nami kachim. Be Shari Mos Hashanah, loy chazi, loy chazi. Says the Gemara, listen, by Pesach, when you're already allowed to eat the Pesach, we lifted this restriction for Pesach. We're going to allow you to eat the other sacrifices as well. But that's only Pesach. Pesach is so strict if you don't eat it at your chayiv kares. So for Pesach, we lifted the restriction and we allowed an onain to eat. But once he's eating Pesach, he eats other sacrificial foods as well. He'll have some chatos, have some shlomin, whatever he wants at the buffet. I imagine you go to the buffet, has chatos, shlomin, whatever your heart desires. Yeah. So, however, the rest of the year that's not Pesach, that's our Mishnah. You're not going to be able to eat. Yeah. So Rav Asi Amar Lo Kasher. Rav Asi said another answer. No, it's not a difficulty. Zbachim says you could eat. Zbachim says you can't eat. It depends when did the person die. Kan shemesel ba'arbasar v'kaver ba'arbasar. When the 14th of Nisan, Erev Pesach, the person died, and they buried him on the 14th. So that's one case. Kan shemesel meis b'shloshasar v'kavru ba'arbasar. Yom kvura lo tapis leilo midirabanan. So when the person dies, so that night he'll still be restricted. And that's gonna be the Gemara in Pesachim that says you can eat Korban Pesach, but not other sacrifices. Only Korban Pesach. Because that's talking about where the person's relative died that day, and that day he was buried. So you're still bound by the biblical rules of Aninos. However, our Mishnah says he can eat. He just doesn't get a portion. That's because on the 13th, the person died. So biblically, we're assuming now, it's going to be a debate coming up soon, but biblically, we're assuming if he died on the 13th of the daytime, the following night, you're still bound by the restriction. Now, if he died on the 13th, but you buried him on the 14th, well, that next night already, that we don't say is going to be included in this restriction. It's only the night after the person died, not the night after he was buried. Yeah, now Rashi points out that the assumption of this Gemara, which might be questioned soon, is that aninos is only a daytime biblical restriction, not a nighttime restriction. The nighttime restriction of being an onain, being someone who lost a relative, and he's not been buried yet, the nighttime restriction is only rabbinic. So on the 14th at 10 a.m., a person dies, God forbid. So at 6 p.m. by sunset, he still is bound by the rules of aninos. However, that's only going to be rabbinic. So our Gemara is saying, how far do we take it? The rabbis gave a restriction on that night after the person died, but not the night after the person was buried. That's already too far removed. So for that, they allowed the person to eat the different sacrifices. Okay. On that, what we just said, that the nighttime of aninos is only rabbinic, ask the Gemara, hold on, whose opinion is that? That's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. He says, the first opinion in the Brisa says, aninos, the nighttime, is also biblical, divrei Torah. But that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, onein einam divrei Torah, elam divrei sofrim. Says Rabbi Shimon, but he says, no, I argue. The nighttime is rabbinical and not biblical. Okay, Teda, I'll prove it to you. Shari Amru. It says in Pesachim, in Onen he can go to the mikveh and that night eat the Pesach, but he can't do it by other sacrifices. He can only do it by the Korban Pesach. So why is that? Because since the nighttime aninos is only rabbinical, they waived it for the Korban Pesach, but they did not waive it for other sacrifices. But if it was biblical, so it's not going to help you. You can't waive it. If it's biblical, you can't eat the Korban Pesach either. The fact that you could eat the Korban Pesach shows you it's only rabbinic. And they only waived it for that, but not for other sacrifices due to the severity of the Korban Pesach. Now, says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon hold the nighttime of aninos is really rabbinical. Look, the Brisa where he himself is talking, Rabbi Shimon Omer, onein eino mishaleach korbanosa. In Onain can't send sacrifices, meaning that he can't partake in the sacrifices. So what's the case? Ma'ilav afilu b'Pesach. It sounds like a blanket rule. You can't really partake in sacrifices. Does that not include Pesach as well? If it includes Pesach, that shows you it's biblical, not rabbinic. Lo libarmi Pesach. It was talking about everything that's not including Pesach. For that, you cannot participate, but Pesach, you could participate in the offerings. Since the nighttime is only rabbinic, that nighttime involvement in the Pesach, we lifted to allow you to partake in the Pesach. However, not by other sacrifices. Rishon Omer Shlomim. Kishu shalem maybe ve'eno maybe kishu onein. So very interesting that it says shlamim, and the Gemara understands that what it's referring to is only when you're whole, when you're complete, shalem, you're complete, can you bring sacrifices. When you're an onein, you're incomplete. Interesting. Happiness is a state of completion, as you see here. Because in onein, what's his deficiency? He's not happy. He's in a state of grieving, right? So that is not called complete. Someone who is mourning is not called complete. So such a person can't bring the sacrifices. Minayin l'rabos es hatoda. So how do I know to include a toda, not only a peace offering? Mar bani es hatoda shekein na'acheles b'simcha kishlamim. The toda has to be eaten in a state of happiness, just like the shlamim. So you hear black and white over here. That eating in happiness, that's a sign of completion. It happens to be that the Maharal Miprad points this out in many places. That, for example, Az Yashir, we sang a song as Yashir. So he says that a song is only sung in a state of happiness. Happiness comes from a state of completion. When you feel you're more complete, your person had happiness. That's why he says Torah brings a person happiness. So you can't learn on Tisha B'Av. But he says it doesn't mean Torah brings you happiness the way we think of it. He says Torah makes you more of a complete individual. Being more complete brings you happiness. Yeah. So Minay l'Rabbi Za'ola. So Mar Ba'aniya Za'ola shekin ba b'neder b'nedava. Tishlamim. An Ola is sorry, I skipped. Minay l'Rabbi said Toda. Mar Ba'aniya Toda shekin nachal b'simcha kishlamim. A Toda, when you're very happy, you're thing, right? Our Birchas Hagomel, people say in one of 4 situations, you bring a Toda when things are very happy. When you think Hashem, you got out of prison, you were saved, you flew over the ocean, etc., etc. So that is something which is like a shlamim. Minayin l'Rabbi says, "Oh, how do I know to include a fully consumed offering that's only brought when someone's in when someone and it cannot be brought when the person's in a state of aninus." Minayin l'Rabbi says, "Oh, ma'arbani says, oh, shkein ba b'neder u'b'nedava kishlamim." It's also similar to a shlamim because it can be brought as a voluntary offering. You can bring an ola as a nether or a nedava. Now, minayin l'Rabbi's bechor, firstborn, you can't bring that as a voluntary offering. Either it is a firstborn or it's not a firstborn. U'mais, or the 10th animal, or Pesach. How do you know that any of these offerings also are going to be similar to a peace offering, which can only be brought in a state of happiness and not in a state of aninus, of when you lose one of the 7 relatives? Marbani bechor u'mais or Pesach shkein einan bayin. These 3 things do not come for a sin. Just like a peace offering doesn't come for a sin, so too these are similar to it, that it doesn't come because of any sin. Minayin l'rabos katos v'asham. Okay, but how do I know I include a sin offering or a guilt offering that those cannot be brought when a person loses one of 7 relatives? That seemingly is not similar to a shlamim. A shlamim is something which is not brought as a result of an avera. These are brought as a result of an avera. Therefore, we're not going to be able to pattern it after a shlamim. If it's different, we're going to have a new source. Talmud lomar zevach. The Torah says the actual word zevach. That it sounds like any sacrifice, even a chatas and asham, will include this restriction that somebody who is in onen, who loses one of the 7 relatives, cannot bring these sacrifices. Okay. Minayin l'rabos ha'ofos v'hamanachos v'hayayin v'ha'etzim ha'lavona. What are the other things we bring? We bring birds. We bring flower offerings. There's wine libations. There's wood that's brought. There's different spices that are brought. All these things. How do you know that you cannot bring any of this up when a person's in a state of aninos, and lose one of the 7 relatives? Talmud lomar. It says in that verse, shlamim. It says shlamim. It says shlamim korbano. That kol korbanos shehu maybe kishu shalim maybe the eno maybe kishu onen. So it says shlamim korbano. His sacrifice has to be brought in a state of completion. Once again, state of happiness is a state of completion, and therefore, if you're an onen, you cannot bring anything up because you are not in a state of completion. Which is interesting because the Kohen Gadol, right? It's interesting. Even though he lost on 7 relatives, he is allowed to bring. So it's interesting. Either it sounds like he's held to a much higher. Either you'll say that it doesn't apply by him. Even if he's not in a state of completion, he still has to bring, maybe. Or you'll say no. Even when he loses one of 7 relatives, such a high level, he still maintains a state of completion. You can understand it one of 2 ways, probably. So, okay. But one of these cases was Kitani Miha Pesach. Okay. Kitani Miha Pesach. One of these cases of things that you cannot bring is a Pesach. So we just had a whole thing explaining that Pesach at nighttime you could partake in the offering, even if you're a state of anis, you could eat the offering at nighttime. So says Zimmer, you're right. Basically, Pesach was unnecessary. It should really be off the list. Why is it there? Good question. Amr of Chisda, Pesach didn't ask it. It's there just once you're listing sacrifices, you're listing this too. But it doesn't really belong. Because the Pesach, you could eat it even though you're in a state of aninus, as we proved earlier. That's one answer, right? We'll call it the best answer. Rav Sheish says another answer. Amar, Ma'i Pesach, Shalmei Pesach. It doesn't mean the Pesach. It means the Shalmei Pesach. It means, and on Pesach, you also bring peace offerings. When the Mishnah listed when this brisa listed Pesach as something which is not able to be brought in a state of aninos or able to be partaken in at all, that was referring to not the Pesach itself, but the shlomim, the peace offerings that are brought with the Pesach. Says Mar Ihachi, that's very repetitive. We already told you shlomim, peace offerings. So what? There's two categories. There's peace offerings, and then there's Pesach peace offerings. That's repetitive. Ihachi hainu shlomim. So Tana shlomim habayin machmas Pesach. Tana shlomim habayin machmas atzma. Yeah, two categories. There's peace offerings, and there's Pesach peace offerings. Now, why would you have to teach me two different kinds of peace offerings? Dilo Tana shlomim habayin machmas Pesach sakanat kamino. Oh, machmas Pesach asu kigufe de Pesach damu kamash malon. You could have thought that just like a Pesach has a special dispensation, even when you're an onen, you can still partake in the Pesach that night. You would have thought that anything which is brought with the Pesach will have the same rules as the Pesach, and you can partake in those shlomim offerings as well. That it spoke out explicitly that no, whether you're a shlomim, a regular peace offering, or a Pesach peace offering, so that's still going to be prohibited for an onen to partake in. Okay.